Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Why is it that something small can happen and hours later is still on your mind? Have you ever noticed it's not what happened, it's how long it stays with you? You move through your day, you have conversations, you handle situations, you respond the best you can. But later, something comes back, a tone, a comment, a look, and even though it's over, it's still there. You feel it in your body. You replay it in your mind. You start making meaning out of it. And before you know it, you're no longer in the present moment. You're inside something that's already happened, still engaged with it as if it never ended. Hi, I'm back with another key to soul progress, and that is stop letting it stay with you, because your growth is not only shaped by what you experience, but by what you continue to carry after it's over. And today, we're going to talk about something that affects almost every area of your life, but often goes unnoticed. Not just what happened to you, but what stays active within you after it's over. Because many people believe that they are reacting to life as it is. And when in reality, they are responding to what they are still carrying from before. And by the end of our time today, you will begin to recognize when something is no longer happening, but still influencing you, how your inner state is being shaped by the moment that is already past. And this becomes important for those walking a spiritual path. How this inner resonance, if you want to call it that, kind of a weighting down of ourselves, of this inner noise or this inner static that stays around. And I'm talking about the static that is sometimes questionable, or did we do something wrong? Or did we handle it in the right manner? Or could we have done it differently? These are all the states, the inner states that create an emotional wave or ripples within us that have an impact upon our well-being and our spiritual well-being. And so what I want to do is to show how to begin to shift that. So you feel more steady, more clear, and more at peace within yourself. Have you ever had a conversation and nothing seemed overly dramatic? You're driving and it comes back. You're doing something completely unrelated, and suddenly you're still thinking about what had happened, or what you should have said, or what you should have done, or what they meant, or how it felt. What's important to notice is this: nothing is happening anymore. It's done. The moment is over. But inside, it's still active. It's like an open tab in your mind that never gets closed. Even when you're doing something else, it's still running in the background. And over time, you don't just experience the moment once. You experience it again and again and again. Now, this is where we need to go a little bit deeper, because the event itself does matter. What was said, what was done, what you experienced, it does matter to the soul. Every experience leaves an impression. But what determines whether that impression becomes growth or becomes something that weighs you down, weighs in on us, is what happens afterwards. It is what you become aware of, what you continue to think about, what you emotionally hold on to, and what meaning you begin to assign to it. So the event touches the soul, but what shapes the direction of the soul is whether you continue to let it stay with you. This is what we can call residual energy. And the residual energy is what remains within you after the moment has passed. It is the emotional and mental activity that continues to turn and have impact upon us. It's after the conversation, after the interaction, after the situation has ended. And this is where many people unknowingly live. And as women, we tend to want to make sure we're doing our best. So we have it like a replay that goes on, trying to tease out what happened there, what was going on in that moment. It is not in the present moment, but it is the continuation of past moments. The overtime that begins to accumulate, especially in midlife, because you are not just holding one experience. You may be holding years of conversations, unresolved disappointments, roles you have carried, expectations that were never fulfilled or only partially fulfilled. So what you feel in the present is often not just about now. It is about what has been allowed to stay, knowingly or unknowingly, just in the back room. Like we have a storage room, or we have an attic, and we put things in the attic, and then we forget about it. Let me give you some examples. And the first one is Rebecca. And I've talked about her before. And she had a brief interaction with her partner. He wasn't loud, he wasn't aggressive, but there was a tone to it. And she moved on it in the moment. But later, it came back, and she replayed it. And then she added meaning. He doesn't respect me. He's always does this. Now notice what happened. The original moment mattered, but what shaped her inner experience afterward was what she continued to think, feel, and reinforce. The moment ended, but it stayed with her. And now she was relating to him, not from what was happening now or happened then, but what was going on inside herself, from what she was still holding, carrying in that moment. And this is where we have to realize that that kind of tape recording or recording that goes on, and we're looking at the nuances of this, that this does have an impact upon the soul. And I'll get to that in a moment. Let's talk about Claire. Claire had a conversation with her adult daughter. And her daughter made a life choice she didn't agree with. And the conversation ended calmly, but inside Claire, it continued to mentally resolve something that was no longer active. What she didn't realize, she wasn't responding to the situation anymore. She was responding to what was still staying within her, trying to make sense of things. So the question becomes, what do you do when something is no longer happening, but is still active within you? This is where your inner authority begins. Not by controlling everything around you, but by becoming aware that what you are allowing to remain within you, because awareness creates space, and space allows you to choose differently. And we also know that as you're walking a spiritual path, the space that exists within us, we want it to be calm. We want it to be an attunement with our own higher self, our soul connected to Christ, connected to God, the Creator, connected to Atman. When we can be more harmoniously inside, what we actually do is begin to look at things from a different light. So we start questioning ourselves, and I'll talk about some practical ways to do this. But one thing I want to get into right now is that when we have these nuances that are happening, we tend to label it as not good, or something missing, or something not right. But have you ever thought about is that when we feel that sense of uncertainty, do we ask our own inner guidance? Do we ask our soul, the spirituality of who we are, what might be happening here? How might I be looking at this from a different direction? Or why am I taking it this way? Is there another way of taking this? We're allowing ourselves to be able not to be caught up in the humanness of the now. And we're asking our inner self to go a little bit higher, like there's 3 ways of going through life. And one of those ways that I talk about in past episodes is a springboard, or a trampoline is the word I use. So we need to sometimes bounce on the trampoline and look higher, be more curious, ask ourselves, why is this bothering me? Because in the meeting, I didn't speak up, but maybe it wasn't right timing for me to speak up. Maybe I needed just to observe and see. Maybe I needed to speak up and not look for validation or look for a person to say something profound from what we said. Maybe we need to be really centered and being more Christ-like. And being more Christ-like means I'm going to say what I need to say. I'm going to leave it. And however it's taken is how it's taken. If I'm speaking from the point of truth, then I stand on that and let people take it the way they need to take it. And then if there's something else I need to say to add clarity or a greater richness to the conversation, I will do it. But it's from a point of being based in your Christhood, being based in knowing that I'm not doing it for performance. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to say. It's the right input for me to give. Whether the people want to agree with it or not, I have to leave that alone. Because when we carry certain things and we then put our interpretation around it, it does shape our behavior. And we don't want things shaping our behavior so much that we really get off the golden path of the middle way of living, the middle way of being. We're not going to go to the extreme right, nor are we going to go to the extreme left. We're just going to be in the middle way, and a point of harmony, a point of joy, a point of giving of ourselves in the best way that we know how. And what happens is that when we don't do that, then we're always basing what we're going to be, what we're going to say, how we're going to give something on strings. Strings being attached. Strings are being kind of pulled, and they're pulling us because based upon whether the person likes it or the person doesn't like it. And we want to go from a different standpoint. That's why I'm talking about inner authority. And that inner authority is the awareness that I am toggled to something far greater than this external experience. I am toggled to my Christhood, my soul, my spiritual path, my awareness that I'm trying to be the best that I can be each and every day. And I'm trying to learn from each experience that I go through. Now, with all that being said, let me talk a little bit about another point. that if you want to be able to help yourself move forward in what I just finished saying, then you first have to begin with, what do you notice? Be the Rebecca situations, what do I notice? And you need to say, am I still carrying this? This particular situation that happened in a meeting, or this particular situation that happened with my daughter, am I continuing to carry it? And if the answer is yes, yeah, I am, then ask, what am I feeling? What am I making this mean? We have to be willing to be a little bit more discerning and being able to say to ourselves, I'm not just going to say, oh, this is just the way it is, but instead, what's the feeling here? Disappointment, hurt, bitterness, uncertainty, fear, angst. And what am I making this mean? And so that you can gently separate what actually happened from what you added to it. And then, instead of continuing to replay the situation, the conversation, what came down the pike in terms of an outcome, you allow it to settle, not by force, not by suppression, but by no longer feeding it and returning to your center. We can get into this aspect of being on a round robin of feeding something. That spin gets faster and faster and faster, and we're not realizing it's spinning so fast is because of what we made up, what meaning we put to it, and how it's really bothering us now. But guess who started the bothersome? We started it within ourselves. We want to kind of take a step back and no longer feed this particular energy. And we want to return to be centered, to be balanced. And when we can be able to do that, take a step back, and we can now see it, and from a higher vantage point, we may say, I'm making too much of this. I don't need to go there. Or it is what it is. And you be the best person you can be, because that's what the calling of God is for us to be our best selves in whatever we do, and however we think, and however we feel. When we're able to do this, move back into center, back into balance, becomes so important, because over time, what you repeatedly hold in your inner world becomes the environment your soul is living within. And that environment will either support your growth or quietly limit you. Here is something to think about. Where in your life is something over, but still staying with you? And what might begin to change? If you became aware of it and choose not to let it stay, this is the key to moving past our interpretations, our thoughts about a situation that's minor, that may not have a major impact upon us, but is turning in our inner world. And that churning that takes place in our inner world creates what you've heard me talk about before, static. And that static means we can't hear the promptings of our soul. We can't hear the promptings of the Christ that exists within us, the Creator, our spiritual source. We can't hear that because we've got too much static, too much mind chatter. We've heard that before, right? Mind chatter. Chatter here, chatter there, chatter all over the place. And the soul works in an atmosphere of quiet, of stillness. And you've heard me say this before, still, staying tuned in light and love. Staying tuned to the pristine beauty that exists within us, that is a part of that silence, that we can hear the calling of our Lord, that we can hear what God is trying to teach us, show us. always willing to be able to make and have self-corrections when we need to, or to notice. This is where awareness becomes so important, walking a spiritual path. We need to notice ourselves. We need to know these nuances or big habits that get in the way from us being our best self, walking a spiritual path, living in the world, giving of ourselves, but also not getting so overly concerned about what that look meant or how that person said it to us. We either A, need to let it go, or B, ask more questions. Ask more questions of that person, or when you're in a meeting, for example, you can ask another colleague that attended the same meeting, what did you make of that meeting? What do you think happened when I said this? And they may give you an entirely different perspective that you had never entertained or thought about, but it also made sense. We have to find ways to quiet our mind so we can hear our inner source, so we can hear our inner promptings of our soul. And also be aware of the fact that the more noise that exists within us, the less that we can hear our Lord, the less that we can hear the Creator, the less we can hear our intuition, which is the aspect of our soul that is always trying to guide us and help us and lift us up. Remember, stop letting it stay within you. Stop letting these little nuance of things occupy your inner world in a way that disconnects you from your higher self, the real self, your true self. For example, Rebecca hears a comment from her partner, and in the moment, she brushes it off. It's fine, not a big deal, she says to herself softly. But later that evening, it comes back. Now the tone feels sharper. And quietly, she tells herself, he didn't have to say it like that. But the next morning, it becomes, he does this a lot. He doesn't really see me. Now notice, the moment lasted seconds. But what stayed with her grew. But to what didn't leave her stayed with her. Keep that in mind. Let's talk about Suzanne, who's another person I've been talking about in these episodes. And she shares an idea in a meeting, and a very important meeting at that, and isn't acknowledged. The moment passes quickly, and at first, she tells herself, it's fine. They were just moving fast. But later, she replays it. She questions herself. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. And by the next morning, she's quieter, more careful, holding back. Now the original moment is over, but it followed her forward. Now Claire is another person we've been talking about. Finishes a conversation with her daughter. This is her adult daughter. It was calm, respectful, but something lingers. Later that night, she feels it again. Not just disagreement, but a sense of distance. And what begins to surface is deeper. And she finds herself saying to herself, I don't know where I fit anymore. Now, it's not just about the moment. It's about meaning. And that is what stays with her. So the question becomes, what do you do when something is over, but is still active within you? And this is where your inner soul authority begins. Not by controlling everything around you, but by becoming aware of what you are allowing to remain within you. Because awareness creates space, and space allows you to choose differently. When we have a lot of this inner energy just sitting upon us because we're ruminating, we're playing it again and again. We don't realize that we're slipping away from having a sense of inner composure and inner peace. And what we ultimately want is having a sense of being anchored in something greater than ourselves, in a sense that events do happen around us, but I don't have to inculcate those events. I don't have to allow them to weigh so heavily on me. Do we need to look at them and see them from different angles and different directions? Yes, that can be of value. But if we're repetitively doing it again and again and again, every situation, every event that happens, that weighs down the soul. One of the things that you can begin to do to lighten your load is just begin simply noticing. Notice goes a long way. For example, quote unquote, I'm still carrying this. And then ask, what am I feeling? What am I making this mean? And when we start to use our perceptive abilities to say, okay, this is just not related to this situation with this person, or this family member, or this work colleague. It's also related to something that has been a common theme in my life about not being visible or not speaking up. Or when I do speak up, people take it the wrong way. What we're trying to do is we're trying to gently separate what actually happened from what you added to it. And those, what I just finished saying, are some of the things that we're adding to the conversation than just what happened. Instead of continuing to replay it, you allow it to settle. Not by force, not by suppression, but by no longer feeding it and returning to your center. Because over time, what you continue to hold within you becomes the environment your soul is living in. And that environment will either support your growth or quietly limit you. Here is something to think about. Where in your life is something over, but still staying with you? At a dinner party, you had a conversation with someone. Or at work, you were in a meeting and you had a side conversation with someone. Or with your adult child or your teenager, you're having certain conversations with them. Where do you notice that those conversations continue to linger in your mind when actually the conversation is over, but your mind continues to perpetuate like propellers, in a speedboat, propelling very quickly, moving forward and making certain interpretations and certain meaning that maybe is not even there, should not even be taken that way. How do we begin to take things as they are, not attach so much meaning to it that it disturbs our inner peace? So I had asked you, where in your life is something over, but still staying with you? And what might begin to change if you became aware of it and chose not to let it stay? And when we are able to consciously, systematically say, that conversation is done. I do not need it to stay. I need it to just let it go. If I have an outstanding question, I'll ask that, but I'm not going to ruminate about this. Because it does occupy space within us. And we're not even aware that we can have ourselves filled with a lot of stuff, of chatter. And this chatter creates a challenge for our soul to be able, for us to hear our soul, to know our soul exists. And what we're ultimately trying to do is integrate our soul with the Christic natures, the values, the things that are important in our life that anchor us, that allows us to know that we are more than any conversation or any event or any circumstance that we find in our lives. But we're always anchored now. Our true anchor is in the higher self, the creator, the I am presence, the Christic nature that exists within us. And when we're anchored in that, then we're able to be able to fall back on God. It's like you're having a conversation with God. You're having a conversation with your inner self, your soul, your Christic nature. You're having that conversation in a very candid way. And then you're putting pauses in for it to reveal itself to you, because the call does compel the answer. That's a universal principle, that when we make the call on something, and we're really sincerely wanting to know, and we're continuing to be in dialogue with our own higher nature, then that answer drops in, or through a person, and through a scripture, or through an event that happens that we realize, oh, that was my answer right there. Then when we're able to do that, that allows us to have a greater sense of inner composure, as I said, inner confidence, inner awareness. And sometimes our own spiritual nature, our own soul self will say, just ask this question next time. And you say, oh yeah, that's a great question. I will ask that question next time. And when we're able to do that, then we're able to now anchor from a different vantage point. We're no longer anchored in what people do, what people say, what events happen to us. But instead, we're taking those situations and we're saying we're anchored in something greater. We're anchored in the Christic nature, our soul self, and the awareness that there are principles and precepts that I walk by. And I don't need to go off the path because of what someone said to me and the meaning I'm attaching to it. And instead, what I'm doing is asking God's guidance in the situation. What do you think about that? What would happen if the next time that you were in a conversation with your significant other and you weren't quite sure what was said, or you woke up the next morning feeling unsettled by the comment that was made or the sarcasm that was made? Have you ever asked a person just simply something like, I woke up today with feeling a little bit unsettled. Can I ask you what you meant by when you said blah, blah, blah? And the person may say, I didn't mean anything about it. I'm just, I was just giving a comment. But then you say, but that type of comment or the word you used or how you said it felt uncomfortable to me and I didn't know what to do at the time. And I just want to follow through now so that we can talk for a few minutes about it. And so you have a better understanding of where I'm at this stage in my life. I have a better understanding of where you're at this stage in your life. Because we have to realize people don't always recognize or see their impact upon us, but just as much the other person, the partner or the significant other, doesn't see the impact that we have on them as well. So one of the things about when you're walking a spiritual path is you're realizing that you use your sensitivity to be able to refine. You use your sensitivity to be able to advance conversations, interactions, or to be able to soften behaviors, or being able to acknowledge when things weren't said accurately or rightly, or were said in a mean-spirited way. Like you're owning up to those things so that they can be reconciled and they can move on. They don't stay with you any longer. Because one of the qualities of walking a spiritual path is honesty. And honesty is being truthful. But you have to realize sometimes truth, we have to detangle a little bit. And we need to ask God's intervention and help to figure out what is the truth in the matter. Because sometimes people will say, my truth is not your truth. Well, that's a lower T. There is a capital T in which there is truth that takes place. And we've got to be in tune to what truth is. Truth is Christic quality of honor, honesty, and humility. And when we're able to do that and anchor ourselves in that greater truth and the conversation that we want to have with someone, we're on the right path. We're moving in the right direction. And the truth, I did a series on truth with Kirk back in October, talking about what that is. and how we can be able to advance truth in our conversations. And so you may want to go back and listen to that. But as we're winding down here and looking at the things we're carrying and the meanings we're attaching to it, and that makes us carry it even more and create even more static, we want to just be attuned to the fact that we want to challenge some of those thoughts, some of those reactions, some of those feelings. We want to be able to make sure that we're getting it in the right way, because everyone has filters by which we see things. So if you are replaying something again and again in your head, think about some of the things I just mentioned and be aware of the fact of what's happening, what's up here. And when you can be able to do that and ask yourself more questions in a gentle way and observe and see what comes up within you, then you are integrating your situation externally with your internal Christic nature, your soul self, the Atman, the creator, the God source that is within you, that is guiding you and directing you and trying to support and help you to live a more enriched life. And be aware of the fact that there are ways in which we uplift our thoughts and feelings, and certain thoughts and feelings that pull us down in feeling sad, feeling mad, feeling angry, feeling anxious. And that's not the direction. It's not the path that we want to move in. Something to think about. Bye for now. And you can find my podcast episodes on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and at Judith, MLA.com.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.